Okay, I think we're ready. Hello everyone, this is the 5th Ethical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul. I'm here with my wife, Diane, Reverend Diane Paul. And tonight we're going to study paper 59. And if you've already downloaded the slides, it may say paper 58, the marine life of Urantia. I'll fix that tonight if you already downloaded it. If not, it'll be corrected after tonight anyway. Just a typo on my area. So this is paper 59, the marine life era on Urantia, and it starts on page 672.1 or 5901. And let's say a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight, giving us the opportunity to study this wonderful revelation. Pray that you'll be with our mechanical problems tonight. We are having some issues, so hopefully that'll clear up. We thank you for all the blessings you've given us, and we thank you for sending Michael or Jesus to earth to help us along. And we know that this weekend coming up is Easter, and it's crucifixion, which is an embarrassment to the world, really, that we would treat the Son of God in such a way. But we pray that you'll bless us and be with us tonight and help us remember what we learned. We thank you and we give you the praise. Amen. Amen. Okay, paper 59. Tim, would you like to start us out tonight?
Yes, we reckon the history of Urantia as beginning about 1 billion years ago and extending through 5 major eras. 1. The pre-life era extends over the initial 450 million years, from about the time the planet attained its present size to the time of life establishment. Your students have designated this period as the
Archaeozoic. Okay.
Archaeozoic.
All right. Let me go back to the beginning paragraph first. I did want to mention something here. So we know that our history started about 1 billion years ago from this slide. So that's the history of our planet, and they're going to break it down into 5 different areas. They're talking about the pre-life area, and we're going to talk about each one of these tonight as we go through this paper. I don't know that we'll make it through this paper because I got like 189 slides in this tonight, so it's quite a bit. So the Archaeozoic area is the pre-life era, and then we go on to the next one. And Millie, would you take the next one, please?
Yes. 2. The life dawn era extends over the next 150 million years. This epoch intervenes between the preceding pre-life or cataclysmic age and the following period of more highly developed marine life. This era is known to your researchers as the Proterozoic.
There you go. Okay, so the next one is 150 million years in length. Okay, so these periods of time they're talking about are huge, long periods of time, millions of years. Me and Diane was sitting on the back porch tonight talking about how our perception of time is so skewed on this world because we only are on this planet less than 100 years, most of us, right? And everything having to do with the universe, even the ascension plan, takes millions of years. And this is a good example of this right here, is the millions of years it takes for a planet to be prepared to even host life. So we're talking about millions and millions of years, and we have no concept of millions of years because of our short life on this planet. This really is just the stepping off stone to our real life, which is our Urantia life that's coming. So in essence, this life is almost of no consequence, okay, other than the fact that we believe in God and believe in the Son of Man. That's the only consequence that we have in this life that's lasting, other than our relationships with each other, right? So this short little period of time that we live on this earth is less than a grain of sand in an ocean. You got to think of it that way. Okay, so Rodney, would you take the next one, number 3?
Yes, 3. The marine life era covers the next 250 million years and is best known to you as the Paleozoic.
Okay, and we're going to talk about this one tonight too. Now, all these names they're using are the names that our scientists have given our history, that as far as they could tell, right? So that's why they're saying known to you as the Paleozoic, I can't even say it, Paleozoic era. This is known to Urantia or Earth scientists as this name. Okay, and their understanding of this is not 100% correct either. So we were talking about this too out on the porch, that if scientists would just read and understand this book, if they really tried to understand it, there would be no way they couldn't believe it, because it breaks down our history from the beginning of time, you know. Okay, dear?
4. The early land life era extends over the next 100 million years and is known as the Mesozoic.
Right. Alright. And the last, the mammalian era, occupies the last 50 million years. We're in that mammalian era, right? This recent times era is known as the Cenozoic era, right? Okay. Alright, Tim, would you take the next one, please?
The marine life era thus covers about 1/4 of your planetary history. It may be subdivided into long periods, each characterized by certain defined developments in the geologic realms and the biologic domains.
So our marine life era is about 1/4 of our past history. So keep in mind, the marine life era is much longer than we've been living, right? Okay. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
As this era begins, the sea bottoms, the extensive continental shelves, and the numerous shallow near-shore basins are covered with prolific vegetation. The more simple and primitive forms of animal life have already developed from preceding vegetable organisms, and the early animal organisms have gradually made their way along the extensive coastline of the various land masses until the many inland seas are teeming with primitive marine life. Since so few of these early organisms had shells, not many of them have been preserved as fossils. Nevertheless, the sages set for the opening chapters of that great stone book of the life record preservation, which was so methodically laid down during the succeeding ages.
What are they talking about, the stone book?
The rock formations.
They're talking about the rock formations and how the rock, because of these organisms living and dying, get stuck in the layers of the rock, and that's how we know about them as scientists, right? We find their imprints and not their bones, but the imprints of their bones, right? So that's how the scientists have come up with these names for these, right? Rodney, would you take the next one?
You know, with as much oil as there is on this planet, it's obviously a very, very old planet.
Very, very old. That's what it'd have to be, wouldn't it, Rodney?
Isn't it about 4.5 billion years old?
What's that? The planet?
What do the revelatories tell us the Earth is?
No, it's 1 bit. The history of it really starts at 1 billion years. That's what they say.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
The concept in the Bible that the world started 4,800 years ago is ridiculous if you think about it. I mean, there's too much evidence to show us that that's not the case, right?
That's very ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Okay, yes, the continent of North America is wonderfully rich in the fossil-bearing deposits of the entire marine life era. The very first and oldest layers are separated from the later strata of the preceding period by extensive erosion deposits, which clearly segregate these two stages of planetary development.
So the trick is just learning how to interpret these layers to get the information, right? Okay, you?
1. Early marine life in the shallow seas, the Trilobite age. By the dawn of this period of relative quiet on the Earth's surface, life is confined to the various inland seas and the oceanic shoreline. As yet no form of land organism has evolved. Primitive marine animals are well established and are prepared for the next evolutionary development. Amoeba are typical survivors of this initial stage of animal life, having made their appearance towards the close of the preceding transition period.
Okay, so the amoeba itself was from this age, right? The amoeba, the first single-cell creatures, right? All right. 400 million years ago, marine life, both vegetable and animal, is fairly well distributed over the whole world. The world climate grows slightly warmer and becomes more equitable. There is a general inundation of the seashores of the various continents, particularly of North and South America. New oceans appear and older bodies of water are greatly enlarged. Okay. Tim?
Okay. Vegetation now for the first time crawls out upon the land and soon makes considerable progress in adaptation to a non-marine
Habitat.
habitat.
Isn't it interesting here? It says that the vegetation actually crawls out of the waters just like the early animals did, didn't it? So basically the seaweed came in and the seaweed started, morphing and creating more inland or oxygen bearing and consuming plants, and it eventually creeps up on the land. And as it creeps up on the land, it being spring to us, we know what happens to the weeds, right? I mean, they can be totally dead, and when spring comes, it turns green everywhere with weeds, right? So it just creeps up. And that's exactly what happened to the vegetation, right? Okay. Millie.
Oh, this is a good one for me. Suddenly.
That's your word, Billy.
Suddenly and without gradation, ancestry, the first multicellular animals make their appearance. The trilobites have evolved, and for ages they dominate the seas. From the standpoint of marine life, this is the trilobite age.
Okay. And we've got lots. First, I want to mention suddenly here. Millie.
That's why I love this book.
Yeah.
I like this section of the book. Lots of suddenlies.
Their idea suddenly may go across multiple millions of years. You know that, right?
Yes.
It's a gradual process, but to them that's sudden. So it's a sudden appearance of the multicellular animals. And what do they look like? Are you all curious? They look
Yes,
like
right.
this.
That's a handsome guy.
All right. This is
Trilobite?
this is a trilobite. Dear, that is so small I can't read it. Can you read that bottom thing down there for me?
Trilobites appear during the middle
Cambrian period.
Cambrian period, prospered during the lower Paleozoic era, but became almost extinct during the Devonian period. The United
just
States
says-
that it
This is
became.
the UB slides.
UB states that it became almost extinct during the Silurian
Syrian period.
period.
Okay, and we got lots of pictures of these. This is trilobites. And these, of course, like we talked about, are imprints in the shell and the stones during that period of time, right? And that's another picture of them. Got lots of pictures of them.
I would like a penny or a dime on that picture so
Yeah.
you have an idea of the size.
Yeah, it would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Are they microscopic or they?
No, they're multicellular, but they're probably fairly small. But since they dominated the sea, there was probably millions and millions and millions of them, right? And they look, the heads look a little bit different. I've noticed that from loading these slides. Some of them look a little different than the others, and I guess it's the evolving of these types of creatures, right? These are all trilobites.
And they must be vegetable eating
Yeah, and
or plankton.
this one here looks like it's got eyes up here, doesn't it?
It does.
This one here is interesting because it shows a legged pattern. You see this, how they're multi-legged?
Yeah.
And they had no predator.
They had no predators, that's right, unless they ate each other, which is fairly common during these early periods. This is trilobites mixed in with other types of cellular type creatures. Kind of interesting. And that's another one. All right, let me get caught up on this one. If y'all wonder why I run two, I have notes on one of them that I can read y'all. Okay, who's up next?
I think
Rodney.
Rodney? Okay.
in the later portion of this time segment, much of North America and Europe emerged from the sea. The crust of the earth was temporarily stabilized. Mountains, or rather high elevations of land, rose along the Atlantic and Pacific coasts. Over the West Indies, from Europe, the entire Caribbean region was highly elevated.
Okay. So most of the Caribbean wasn't islands, it was landmass that was way up in the air, right? All right. Diane.
390 million years ago, the land was still elevated. Over parts of eastern and western America and western Europe may be found the stone strata laid down during these times, and these are the oldest rocks which contain trilobite fossils. There were many long, finger-like gulfs projecting into the land masses in which were deposited these fossil-bearing rocks.
Okay, so if you know where to look for these things, you can find them still. Okay, within a few million years, the Pacific Ocean began to invade the American continents. The sinking of the land was principally due to crustal adjustment, although the lateral land spread or continental creep was also a factor. And what are they talking about continental creep here? They're talking about the whole land continent moving away from each other. You know, the Americas moving away from Africa and Europe, right? All right. 380 million years ago, Asia was subsiding and all other continents were experiencing a short-lived emergence. But as this epoch progressed, the newly appearing Atlantic Ocean made extensive inroads on all adjacent coastlines. The northern Atlantic or Arctic seas were then connected with the southern Gulf waters. When these southern seas entered the Appalachian Trough, its waves broke upon the east against mountains as high as the Alps. But in general, the continents were uninteresting lowlands, utterly devoid of scenic beauty. Okay, the interesting part about this is very important, is the fact that the Atlantic invaded all along this separation of lands, and also it invaded into all of the Middle East and that sort of thing. So things like the Dead Sea, the Caspian Sea, and things like that were actually ancestor to what? The Atlantic Ocean, and they got landlocked as these periods of land rose and subsided, right? So it's interesting that all life all the way around the planet literally came from the same sources when it comes right down to it. And what we have on different continents is just slight variations of those animals and cells and things like that that ended up on those particular plants and flourished. You know, so kind of interesting. All right, Tim, would you read this slide? It's got 4 parts, so go ahead and read all 4.
The
Sedimentary.
sedimentary deposits of these ages are of 4 sorts. 1, conglomerates.
Conglomerates. Yeah.
Conglomerates, matter deposited near the shorelines. 2, sandstones, deposits made in shallow water, but where the waves were sufficient to prevent mud settling. 3, shells, deposits made in the deeper and more quiet water. 4, limestone, including the deposits of trilobite shells in deep water.
There you go. This is the examples of what happened, right? Millie, would you take the next one, please?
The trilobite fossils of these times present certain basic uniformities coupled with certain well-marked variations. The early animals developing from the 3 original implantations were characteristic. Those appearing in the Western Hemisphere were slightly different from those of the Eurasian group and from the Australian or Australian Antarctic type.
What are we talking about here? The implantations, right? It's that group that the life carriers put together
Plasma.
in plasma.
Was it plasma?
Yeah, plasma put together and implanted in the oceans, right? Or the shallow.
Probably why we don't have penguins up here.
Yeah, probably so. All right. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
All right. 370 million years ago, the great and almost total submergence of North and South America occurred, followed by the sinking of Africa and Australia. Only certain parts of North America remained above these shallow Cambrian seas. 5 million years later, the seas were retreating before the rising land, and all of these phenomena of land sinking and land rising were undramatic, taking place slowly over millions of years.
So when you go visit anywhere and they tell you that this land was once underwater, it was true. And it was true
Many
for,
times.
yeah, several times. And this particular time it was 5 million years underwater. So 5 million years underwater gives it plenty of time to put down all kinds of fossils and fish shells and that sort of thing. So when you go to some place like the Grand Canyon or you go to Utah or any of these places where people are digging up fossils and things like that, yeah, they're going to find some that's been underwater for that shows that the United States was underwater at one time. Yeah, because it was for 5 million years and then it slowly rose again, right? So that's what they're talking about here. They were undramatic. It took so much time that if you were there, you wouldn't even notice the change, right, as it was happening. It took so long. All right. Here.
The trilobite fossil-bearing strata of this epic outcrop here and there throughout all the continents except in Central Asia. In many regions, these rocks are horizontal, but in the mountains they are tilted and distorted because of pressure and folding. And such pressure has, in many places, changed the original character of these deposits. Sandstone has been turned into quartz, shale has been changed to slate, while limestone has been converted into marble.
So this violent moving of the earth over time folds it, creates different mountains and things like that. So it's not like you can just look at it and it's just one level after another everywhere, right?
Hey Roger, I had a question.
Yeah.
They mentioned, I think it was either Salmington or Urantia where it has crystal.
Uh-huh.
Is that the reference in quartz? Is it the same substance?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so crystal and quartz are pretty much the
Crystal,
same.
yeah, they could be used interchangeably. All right. 360 million years ago, the land was still rising. North and South America were well up. Western Europe and the British Isles were emerged, except parts of Wales, which was deeply submerged. There were no great ice sheets during these ages. The supposed glacial deposits appearing in connection with these strata in Europe, Africa, China, and Australia are due to isolated mountain glaciers or to the displacement of glacial debris of later origin. The world climate was oceanic, not continental. The southern seas were warmer than that now, and they extended northward over North America up to the polar regions. The Gulf Stream coursed over the central portion of North America, being deflected eastward to bathe and warm the shores of Greenland, making that now ice-mantled continent a veritable tropic paradise.
Wow.
So Greenland during this period of time was a tropic paradise. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. Tim, would you take the next one?
The marine life was much like the world over and consisted of the seaweeds, one called organisms,
One cell.
one-celled organisms, simple sponges, trilobites, and other
Crustaceans.
crustaceans, shrimps, crabs, and lobsters. 3,000 varieties of
Brachiopods.
brachiopods appeared at the close of this period. 200 of which have survived. These animals represent a variety of early life, which has come down to the present time, particularly unchanged.
So when you go to Red Lobster and have a lobster or shrimp or crab, you're eating the ancestors of these early fish. How about
Well,
that?
they taste pretty good.
Yeah, still tasty, right? After all these years. Would it be a shame if they were all overfished to extinction? And after making it all this, 500 million years and stuff. All right. Millie.
But the troglodytes were the dominant living creatures. They were sexed animals and existed in many forms. Being poor swimmers, they sluggishly floated in the water or crawled along the sea bottom, curling up in self-protection when attacked by their later appearing enemies. They grew in length from 2 inches to 1 foot, that tells us something, thank you,
Yeah.
and developed into 4 distinct groups: carnivorous, herbivorous, omnivorous, and mud eaters. The ability of the latter group, largely to subsist on inorganic matter, being the last multi-celled animal that could, explains their great increase and long survival.
So that's what
Hey,
happened.
Roger.
So the trilobites were small and grew. They started at just like 2 inches and grew to be 1 foot.
Yeah, that's correct. So you can think I'm grown to about the size of a lobster, right?
Right.
Yeah. Or starting out at about the size of a crawfish.
So
Yeah.
hey, Roger, the word carnivorous is where they would eat each other, right?
Yeah, carnivorous.
And then it goes
meat
on
eaters.
carnivorous, and then what do those other two mean?
Herbivorous basically meant that they ate herbs of the ocean.
They
Okay.
green stuff. They
Yeah,
green stuff.
green
plants.
stuff.
The
That's
algae,
right. The algae,
Plants,
anything green,
okay.
seaweed,
and then
things like
the
that.
other one.
Omnivorous basically meant they ate both. They were both carnivorous and herbivorous at the same time. So they ate both meat and vegetables.
They'll eat whatever comes by.
That's right, whatever was
Wonderful.
there.
Thank you so
And
much.
what about mud eaters?
And
They ate
the mud eaters,
insects or something? And
They sift the bottom and get nutrition off of whatever ended up on the bottom. There's a bunch of mud eaters in the ocean today still,
Isn't it kind of like cleaning fish? The
They're
ones
like
that are on
cleaning fish. If you think of shrimp are mud eaters.
Ew.
Lobsters really is like a big cockroach. It's a mud
Oh.
eater, and they eat other things, but that's basically what a mud eater is. Crawfish, catfish are mud eaters.
Yeah.
Tar.
scavengers.
Yeah,
And crabs. When we would go crabbing,
crabs are
we
mud
just
eaters.
hang any old dead piece of chicken on
Yeah.
this string and put it down, and the crabs would come running.
Yeah. Crawfish are mud eaters. Think of Louisiana. Boy, that's just
Yeah.
full of mud in the streams and stuff. So there's quite a few of them still around. All right. All right. And when it comes right down to it, we're kind of mud eaters. We have to eat our own mud. Sometimes when we make mistakes, we have to eat it, right?
Are you talking about our dinner tonight?
Yeah, no.
I'm just checking.
I'm thinking more psychologically.
Oh.
We eat our own words sometimes.
Oh.
None of us are perfect. Okay, who's up? I think Rodney is.
This was the biogeologic picture of Urantia and for that long period of the world's history, embracing 50 million years, designated by your geologists as the Cambrian.
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 Alright.
To the first continental flood stage, the invertebrate animal age. The periodic phenomena of land elevation and land sinking characteristic of these times were all gradual and non-spectacular, being accompanied by little or no volcanic action. Throughout all of these successive land elevations and depressions, the Asiatic mother continent did not fully share the history of the other land bodies. It experienced many inundations, dipping first in one direction and then another, more particularly in its earlier history, but it does not present the uniform rock deposits which may be discovered on the other continents. In recent ages, Asia has been the most stable of all the land masses.
Okay, they're talking about undulations.
Mhm.
So the land's going like this, right, constantly. And what they're saying here that Asia has been the most stable of these land masses in the recent ages. But if you think about places like Alaska, where they have earthquake constantly, California, anywhere where there's fault lines and things like that, the land is still undulating, right? So what does that mean? That means that the rising and the lowing of the continent is still going on to some extent.
I saw a geological map many years ago. I had it for a while. It was disturbing to me, so I finally got rid of it. But one of the most stable geologic areas in the United States was Four Corners, which was Arizona and Colorado, yeah,
New Mexico.
and New Mexico, and what's the fourth one? I don't know. It's been a long time. We visited there, but it was nothing but, I think the Hopi Indians
Utah.
were there. Utah?
Utah, I think, yeah.
My son went snorkeling off the coast of Potsawawi, which is just outside of Naples, and could look down through his mask and see a city down below.
Oh my
The
gracious.
area in around Naples is very volcanic. We could walk on top of a volcano crust. The guide, and I learned not to stand out there with him, would pick up a big rock and throw it, and it was like somebody hit on a big drum.
Yeah.
We were actually on a crust on top of a volcano, but that whole area is very volcanic. And
Yeah.
the land still goes up and down. And the city my son was looking down on wasn't that old, like 100 years, if that
Oh
much.
my goodness.
Yeah.
And it was maybe 50 years.
Well, knowing the history of our planet now, you can see how this is important for us to understand this for future things. When we read about the first and second garden submerging, this is why, right?
Mhm.
It's a normal movement of the land. So the site of the first garden basically was built over in like a fault line, so that's that in the valley. So that's what happened to that one. The second one basically submerged into the sea, so
Wasn't that after Adam and Eve died?
that was after Adam and Eve died. Yeah. But
I remember a documentary on National Geographic. It was so amazing because the Urantia papers are so ahead of its time,
yeah,
and it was talking about how there was a flood and how Noah was, kind of like he was on like his little boat. It wasn't like the story in the Bible,
oh
but
yeah, no,
it's just so amazing how they were describing exactly what the papers were talking about.
yeah, reality eventually comes along sooner or later, right? So it is interesting, but knowing this information gives you a pretty good idea of what they're talking about in later parts of the book. You know, when they're talking about great land sinkings and things like that. It makes me wonder, you know, people have been looking for Atlantis for, you know, thousands of years now. It makes me wonder if they're not really looking for either Dalmatia, the first garden, or the area for Adam and Eve, one of the two. Could be, you know, we just don't know. Okay, who's up next?
I think I just read.
Oh, did you?
I just read.
Oh, you just
You
read? Yeah. Then you need
Me again?
Yep.
Oh, mine's kind of quickly. 350 million years ago saw the beginning of the Great Flood period of all the continents except Central Asia. The land masses were repeatedly covered with water. Only the coastal highlands remained above these shallow but widespread oscillatory inland seas. 3 major inundations characterized this period, but before it ended, the continents again arose. The total land emergence being 15% greater than now exists. The Caribbean region was highly elevated. This period is not well marked off in Europe because the land fluctuations were less, while the volcanic action was more persistent.
Okay, so 15% of the land mass that we have today is gone, right? It's sunk under the oceans. Okay? Now, another interesting thing about this too is, you know, we always have these scares about what would happen if the polar ice caps melted. Yeah, yeah. Actually, we started out with the polar ice caps melted, right? We were basically a water world, you know, to start out with, except for the peaks of the mountains, right? And worse things could happen than the polar ice caps melting, right? So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. You know, sometimes we're like the chicken that's running around telling us, everybody, that the sky's falling. You know, we have a lot of that going on in our scientific community. Okay, 340 million years ago there occurred another extensive land sinking, except in Asia and Australia. The waters of the world's oceans were generally commingled. This was a great limestone age, much of the stone being laid down by lime-secreting algae. So we got lime-secreting algae creating much of the limestone. Okay. Tim, would you take the next one?
A few million years later, large portions of the American continents and Europe began to emerge from the water. In the Western Hemisphere, only an arm of the Pacific Ocean remained over Mexico and the present Rocky Mountain regions. But near the close of this epoch, the Atlantic and Pacific coast again began to sink.
There you go, the Atlantic and Pacific coasts, right? So this is not an uncommon occurrence. Millie, you take the next one.
$330 million years ago marks the beginning of a time sector of comparative quiet all over the world, with much land again above water. The only exception to this reign of terrestrial quiet was the eruption of the great North American volcano of eastern Kentucky, one of the greatest single volcanic activities the world has ever known. The ashes of this volcano covered 500 square miles to a depth of from 15 to 20 feet.
So think about this. There's a large area of Kentucky that was created by what? The volcano and the volcanic ash, right? Okay, 15 to 20 feet of it.
Did we even know there was a volcano in Kentucky?
Huh?
Did we even know there's a volcano in Kentucky?
Yeah, because they have 2 different areas in Kentucky where one of them you have access to it, go down to the caverns, and the other one's totally closed off because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's well known in that area, but it's kind of an isolated.
Isn't Mammoth Cave in Kentucky?
Mammoth Cave is where I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Mammoth Cave's in Kentucky. So there's been a lot of movement right in the central part of America, if you
Well, they
think
say
about
that the fault line too runs down through Mississippi River
Yeah.
all the way down. And it's
it. They
actually
say
a
there's a
divide.
fault line that actually runs down through North Georgia
I've
too.
heard that too. You know, when
Yeah.
I first bought my house out in Norris Lake, we found out after we signed the contract and everything that there had been
An earthquake.
an
there.
earthquake there. Yeah, there's a fault line there right to the lake where I live. I'm like, oh jeez, oh boy.
Okay.
Nobody talks about it though.
Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
All right. And I should apologize to Diane because she read twice.
You know, I thought I did.
That's all right.
I'm like, didn't I just hear my voice?
She's my wife. I love to hear her read it.
Oh, thank you, dear.
All right, 320 million years ago, the third major flood of this period occurred. The waters of this inundation covered all of land submerged by the preceding deluge. While thinning in many directions all over the Americas and Europe, Eastern North America and Western Europe were from 10,000 to 15,000 feet underwater.
No. Now think about this: 10,000 to 15,000 feet underwater, right?
Yeah, that's quite deep.
That's a lot of water. Think about that. And the fact, you remember, if you go down underwater like that, the pressure of the water is what? Tremendous. Okay, so the Eastern North America and Western Europe were both under this a tremendous pressure for this long period of time.
It's really why North Carolina is so beautiful, and you know, especially the coast and everything. But the whole state is gorgeous.
Yeah. All right.
But that was 320 million years ago.
320 million.
That's a long time.
That's a long time ago. Years up here.
Oh. 310 million years ago, the land masses of the world were again well up, excepting the southern parts of North America. Mexico emerged, thus creating the Gulf Sea, which has ever since maintained its identity.
The life of this period continues to evolve. The world is once again quiet and relatively peaceful. The climate remains mild and equitable. The land plants are migrating farther and farther from the seashores. The land patterns are well developed, although few plant fossils of these times are to be found. Tim, you're up.
This was the great age of individual animal organism evolution, though many of the basic changes, such a transition from planet to animal, had previously occurred. The marine fauna developed to the point where every type of life below the
Vertebrate scale.
vertebrate scale was represented in the fossils of those rocks which were laid down during these times. But all of these animals were marine organisms. No land animals had yet appeared except a few types of worms which burrowed along the seashores, nor had the land plants yet overspread the continents. There was still too much carbon dioxide in the air to permit of the existence of air breathers, primarily all animals, except certain of the more primitive ones are directly or indirectly dependent on plant life for their existence.
Okay, so think about this for a second. This planet, when it began, was a non-breathing planet for millions of years, right? Because there was no oxygen, right? Mostly carbon dioxide. So, you know, when you read in the book about the different type of non-breathers for humans, this is the type of planet they ended up on that did not develop enough oxygen or a mixture of gases to sustain lung-type life.
I guess that's why trees are so valuable and so precious to us, because of the oxygen.
Yeah, and when we overcut the trees, we're actually killing ourselves because we're cutting out the oxygen that the trees and the plants provide for us as humans, right?
You know, there's a lot of stupid people out there, I'm not going to name any, but they say, cut down our trees, use all our oil, it doesn't matter, we're going to be out of here.
Yeah, that is really stupid because
Stupid, yeah.
yeah, it really is.
For future generations.
Future
I mean, come on.
generations. That's right. That's right. You're
Because he
changing.
thinks he's going to vanish.
That's right. You're changing the eco life of the planet, which is not your right to do that, right? And when I see these developers come in neighborhoods and clear cut all the trees for profit, it just makes me sick. It really does.
Me too, especially our rainforest too. And
Yeah.
Amazon and all that stuff out there.
Yeah, there's no excuse in it. You know, when human beings start putting profit in front of what's best for each other and our planet, then they're concentrating on the wrong things, right? All right. Billy, I think you're up next.
Turn on the mic. The trilobites were still prominent. These little animals existed in tens of thousands of patterns and were the predecessors of modern crustaceans. Some of the trilobites had from 25 to 4,000 eyelids. Yeah. Others had aborted eyes. As this period closed, the trilobites shared domination of the seas with several other forms of invertebrate life, but they utterly perished during the beginning of the next period.
Okay, do y'all understand what an invertebrate life is? They're talking about?
Now, what is it?
It's the difference between an animal that has bony vertebra and one that does not. Okay, so invertebrate is one that actually has a spinal cord. It's got bone. It starts development of bones and that sort of thing. We're considered invertebrate, right? Okay.
So it's kind of like saying no backbone?
No backbone. That's right. Okay, Roger.
Hey, Roger,
Yeah,
yeah, it's my turn. I have a question here.
yeah. Go right ahead, Roger.
So, apparently it was a life carrier that recorded all of this, because these events had to be recorded.
That's
Yeah,
right.
this was
that's
written
right.
by the life carrier that was here on the from Nebadon here on Urantia.
Yeah. Now remember, once a planet is suitable for life and goes on the registry of Salvington or Nebadon, right? That planet is watched and its history is recorded from day one down through the millions and millions of years. So nothing happens on a planet, any planet, that they do not have record of. And they can rely on the records of Salvington or Nebadon to write this, or the records of the memories of the life carriers, either one. So, nothing is ever lost. I was thinking the other day when I was working on this that it must be awful boring for a life carrier to sit and watch millions of years, watch things slowly develop. It makes you wonder what they do in their spare time, if they have any spare time.
Probably have a card game.
Yeah, really. Okay, go ahead, Rodney. Take the next one.
Okay, lime-secreting algae were widespread. There existed thousands of species of the early ancestors of the corals. Sea worms were abundant, and there were many varieties of fish which have since become extinct. Corals and the later types of sponges evolved. The cephalopods were well developed, and they have survived as the modern pearly nautilus, octopus, cuttlefish, and squid.
All right, and I have a picture
Now,
of a nautilus, right? This is an interesting creature. It kind of reminds you of a snail.
Yeah, it does look like
in
a snail's
in a
shell.
sense, doesn't it? Okay, but this is the whole explanation of the chambered nautilus. And this, scientists believe, is the first creature, right? Right here. But it actually wasn't. There were other there were the trilobites before them. But it is interesting. It is a very very early creature. And we have another picture here, and you can see these on the
Roger,
slide. Yeah,
they put oxygen in or air into those chambers to float higher or lower.
right.
They can regulate the depth.
That's right. They can.
So hey, Roger,
Yeah.
scientists aren't familiar with the word trilobite.
Yes, they
Pretty
are.
much this is just coming out of the Urantia papers, correct?
No, they are familiar with trilobite. Yeah,
Okay.
they are. Yeah.
But they don't know that it's the first living actual creature.
They don't know that. No.
Okay.
I think some of them believe that this was the first actual creature, but we know better now. This is shows nautilus basically. They call it a coiled nautiloid, and it's about 410 million years old, and it's from the Devonian, Norway. So that's pretty old. Just the fact that something survived 410 million years is just in itself just amazing, you know. It says, although they flourished around 400 million years ago, only one nautiloid genus survives today. They don't know that for sure. There may be others
Yeah.
that's buried that they don't know about. All right. Okay. Kind of humble it though, doesn't it?
does,
You
yeah.
know? All right. Here, I think you're right.
There were many varieties of shell animals, but their shells were not then so much needed for defensive purposes as in subsequent ages. The gastropods were present in the waters of the ancient seas, and they included single-shelled drills, periwinkles, and snails. Their bivalve gastropods have come on down through the intervening millions of years, much as they then existed, and embraced the mussels, clams, oysters, and scallops. The valve-shelled organisms also evolved, and these brachiopods lived in those ancient waters much as they exist today. They even had hinged, notched, and other sorts of protective arrangements of their valves.
All right, and we have some pictures of those. Okay, these are bivalves and brachiopods. All right, the brachiopods are rare, even though they were once abundant. The bivalve two-shot joined by a ligament. Okay, and this is from scientists. This is not from the Urantia book, right? And they estimated they are 505 to 495 million years ago, the late Cambrian period. So they're off a little bit in the millions of years, but that's okay. And guess what that is?
Clam
Huh?
shell.
Yeah, that's a shell, right.
Oyster.
Huh?
A clam.
Yeah, a clam. Yeah, and you can find these in the ocean today in abundance.
Yeah, there's a place called Pismo Beach in California, which is a Portuguese
Yeah,
town that they had all kinds of. They had clam bakes and they had clam
yeah,
festivals and stuff there.
yeah. Okay, and these are encrusted in basically coral rock that's millions and millions of years old. You know, probably 400 million years old. Okay, and this is another example of that. And then you see the stone around it, and more of those. And this is the same thing. These are fossilized shells, right? These, if you go diving in certain parts of Florida and stuff, you still find these things. You know, Diane knows I have multiple examples of shells that's millions of years old in our cabinet here when I used to teach scuba diving. Okay, and this is a rock containing the fossilized shells of marine bivalves. You can see the shells encrusted in. All right. Am I up? Okay, so ends the evolutionary story of the second great period of marine life, which is known to your geologists as the Ordovician.
Ordovician.
Ordovician? I'm not sure how you pronounce that one. All right. Tim, would you take the next one?
Section 3, the second great flood stage, the core period. The Branchiopod age,
Yep.
300 million years ago, another great period of land submerge began. The southward and northward encroachment of the ancient Silurian seas made ready to engulf most of Europe and North America. The land was not elevated far above the sea, so that not much deposition occurred about the shorelines. The seas teem with lime shell life, and the falling of these shells to the sea bottom gradually built up very thick layers of limestone. This is the first widespread limestone deposit, and it covers practically all of Europe and North America, but only appears at the Earth's surface in a few places. The thickness of this ancient rock layer averages about 1,000 feet, but many of these deposits have since been greatly deformed by tilting,
just tilting back and forth. Yeah.
tilting upheavals and faulting, and many have been changed to quartz, shell, and marble.
Okay. That's why we have such a large abundance of marble. Right? All right.
It's, I think it's interesting that they call this the ancient sea.
Yeah, the ancient sea. Yeah.
This other word, whatever it was.
Ancient Silurian Sea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really not ancient. I mean, I guess perspectives, you know.
Yeah, to us it's ancient, that's for sure. To them it's nothing, yeah. So. All right, Millie, would you take the next one?
No fire rocks or lava are found in the stone layers of this period except those of the great volcanoes of southern Europe and eastern Maine and the lava flows of Quebec. Volcanic action was largely past. This was the height of great water deposition. There was little or no mountain building.
It's funny how they know exactly when everything happened and how the mountains were built. Rodney, would you take the next one, please?
Yeah, Roger. And I've got a note right away.
Yeah, go ahead and give it to us.
But Tim just read up above 300 million years ago. I've got in parentheses there that this was about the time of Michael's fifth storm.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful note, Rodney. Hey, Roger, I just had a question. It says no fire rocks. That means the rocks were on fire? Is that in reference to like a volcano?
Yeah, that's in reference to the volcanic rock that gets spewed out. Yeah.
Okay, 290 million years ago, the sea had largely withdrawn from the continents, and the bottoms of the surrounding oceans were sinking. The land masses were little changed until they were again submerged. The early mountain movements of all the continents were beginning, and the greatest of these crustal upheavals were the Himalayas of Asia and the great Caledonian Mountains, extending from Ireland through Scotland and on down to Spitsbergen.
So all these beautiful mountains came from this period. All right.
It is in the deposits of this age that much of the gas, oil, zinc, and lead are found. The gas and oil being derived from the enormous collections of vegetable and animal matter carried down at the time of the previous land submergence, while the mineral deposits represent the sedimentation of sluggish bodies of water. Many of the rock salt deposits belong to this period.
Isn't it interesting here that they talk about the oil coming from the enormous collections of vegetable and animal matter carried down the time of the previous land submersion. So this matter, or plants and animals, got submerged and caught in layers, and that's what eventually turned to the oil.
The scientists always said that all this oil came from dinosaurs.
Yeah, yeah. And
But the oil was here before the dinosaurs.
the oil was here way before the dinosaurs. Yeah. And we just using it up like crazy.
Ours for the taking.
That's right. The trilobites rapidly declined, and the center of the stage was occupied by the larger mollusks or cephalopods. These animals grew to be 15 feet long and 1 foot in diameter and become masters of the seas. This species of animal appears suddenly and assumed dominance of sea life.
Hey Roger, I had a question.
Yeah.
Why don't the scientists today believe in this kind of stuff?
Because probably, Tim, they haven't read and understand this book. If they did read it, the trouble is with reading this book, people take a quick peruse through it once and think they've read it. And I don't care how smart you think you are, you cannot understand this book with one reading. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And then they find things in it that go against what they have been taught or believe, and so they just disregard it because it doesn't fall in line with their belief system, And that's the problem with many Christian sects today too, is the problem they have with the concept of Jesus and that sort of thing. The concepts that are taught in this book are foreign to them compared to what they find in the New Testament. And they don't realize that the New Testament was just a compilation of writings from men that never intended them to be put together as a book. It wasn't till 390 AD that the first New Testament per se was put together. So, but different people believe different things. So,
Thank you.
okay. Tim, would you take the next one?
The trilobites.
We just read that.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Who just read then?
No, it's Tim's turn, but
Oh, is it Tim? Okay. All right.
you had the wrong thing up.
All right. Sorry,
The
y'all.
great volcanic activity of this age was in the European sector. Not in the millions upon millions of years had such violent and extensive volcanic eruptions occurred as now took place around the Mediterranean
Trough.
trough, and especially in the neighborhood of the British Isles. This lava flow over the British Isles region today appears as arginate layers of lava and rock, 25,000 feet thick. These rocks were laid down by the intermittent lava flows, which spread out over a shallow seabed, thus interspersing the rock deposits, and all of this was subsequently elevated high above the sea. Violent earthquakes took place in northern Europe, and notably in Scotland.
Just about tells us where every country comes from, doesn't it? All right. Millie, would you take the next one?
The oceanic climate remained mild and uniform, and the warm sea bathed the shores of the polar lands.
Polar land.
No, polar lands, of the polar lands. The warm sea bathed the shores of the polar lands. Brachiopods and other marine life fossils may be found in these deposits right up to the North Pole. Gastropods, brachiopods, sponges, and reef-making corals continue to increase.
So these shells can be found all the way up to the North Pole. And guess what I got 24 pictures of? The North Pole. These are all pictures of the North Pole and different movements in the North Pole. Rodney probably recognizes the White Mountain stuff.
Oh yeah, that's in my backyard.
Yeah.
Where Santa Claus Claus hat.
He is Santa Claus.
It's like,
Yeah, he's on that little mountain there. No. If you look real closely, you'll see a little pole there. But this is an interesting landscape. You can even see, you know, mixed in with the ice and stuff, the darker strata and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. It looks like rivers, doesn't it?
This sure is wonderful, Roger. Thank you so much for providing these slides. It helps to give us a visual.
Yeah.
It's very
It
nice.
helps if you see things sometimes, I think. You know. There's a lot of them, but you can look at them at your leisure.
Looks like it's flying into Alaska, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Rodney.
it does kind of. Actually, you can see the tail fin of
Into
the
Anchorage,
plane.
yeah.
Yeah. This is
And
real
this
for me.
book says that warm seas
Yeah.
the shores of the polar lands.
Yeah. So at one time it wasn't all frozen then, probably, you know. And these are the great gaps in the ice and stuff. You see this?
well,
I've seen on National Geo or other History Channel where great chunks of some of the icebergs are breaking off.
Yeah.
Say it again?
it's called Calvin.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting when we were up visiting Rodney up in Alaska. We got to see the one of the glaciers up there, and we saw one of the pieces come off. and
Actually fall off.
actually
yeah.
fall into the lake there. It was kind of special and interesting.
Well, when it falls into the waters, it raises the water level.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were on a big boat.
Right, yeah.
We were on a very large boat.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Okay. Who just read?
Okay, close of this epic witnesses the second advance of the Silurian seas, one another commingling of the waters of the southern and northern oceans. The cephalopod dominate marine life, while associated forms of life progressively develop and differentiate.
Here.
280 million years ago, the continents had largely emerged from the second Silurian inundation. The rock deposits of this submergence are known in North America as Niagara limestone because this is the stratum of rock over which Niagara Falls now flows. This layer of rock extends from the eastern mountains to the Mississippi Valley region, but not farther west except to the south. Several layers extend over Canada, portions of South America, Australia, and most of Europe. The average thickness of this Niagara series being about 600 feet. Immediately overlying the Niagara deposit in many regions may be found a collection of conglomerate, shale, and rock salt. This is the accumulation of secondary substances. This salt settled in great lagoons which were alternately opened up to the sea and then cut off so that evaporation occurred with deposition of salt along with other matter held in solution. In some regions these rock salt beds are 70 feet thick.
Pretty thick.
Pretty thick, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. You even bring it back to Niagara Falls, don't they? All right. The climate is even and mild, and marine fossils are laid down in the Arctic regions. But by the end of this epoch, the seas are so extensively salty that little life survives. Too much salt. Right? Okay.
I think it's Millie's turn.
It's your turn, Tim.
Oh, okay. Because I know that, I just read that one.
It goes by fast.
You know,
It does, yeah.
Just toward the close of the final Silurian
Mm-hmm.
submergence, there is a great increase in the, how do you pronounce it? The chin,
Derms.
the pseudodyms, the stone lilies, as is evidenced by the Crynord limestone deposits. The tribalites have nearly disappeared, and the mollusks,
Yeah.
continue monarchs of the seas. Coral reef formations increases greatly during this age in more favorable locations of primitive waters. Scorpions first evolved. soon thereafter, and suddenly the true scorpions, actual air breathers, made their appearance.
Okay.
These, yeah.
Here we go. This is the brittle stars. Have 5 long, flexible arms that radiate from a nearly circular disk. You see this over here? Okay. 423 to 419 million years ago, the late Silurian period. Okay, and these are called, what's the next slide?
Fish fossils. They're oh, okay.
Hang on. Let's go back here. Hang on. What does that say down there? Silurian period.
Water scorpions and then true scorpions.
Spiny sharks.
Spiny sharks. That's what I couldn't think of. Spiny sharks, and you can see them in the outlines here. These are little sharks. Okay. Spiny sharks. This is 470 million years old. It's a fish fossil, and I can't really see this one. It's supposed to be inside the rock there. It looks like this. Okay, and this is the Devonian period, and this is a fish in here. It's hard to see, but there's an actual outline of a fish inside that. Sort of, yeah, it's kind of hard to see. And this is, read that, the bottom of that slide over here.
Armored fish.
An armored fish, and it's in the, does it say that which period? This is the
Both
Devonian period.
belongs to the genus of Placidermus armored fish. I don't know, it doesn't say.
Yeah. But it looks like it's got armor on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Alright. And this is another fish here. Y'all find these interesting?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Be able to see what you're. These are odd looking creatures. They almost look like little pipes of some type.
Probably
And
not.
that's more of them, right?
Where do you get all these images at, Roger?
They're from Encyclopedia Urantia.
Branch. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, where all these came from.
Great job.
And this is the coral. Some of the last ones.
Did you want to save section 4 for next week?
Yeah, I'm gonna quit after this section tonight. All right, this is, I think we saw this slide before, but this is more Silurian fossils pictures from the virtual fossil. You can click on this link and it'll take you more fossils than you'll ever imagine. Okay?
So, it's stated here that
One more and then we're gonna knock off for the night.
actual air breathers.
Pardon me, Rodney?
The scorpions were the true first actual air breathers.
Air breathers, that's right. That's right.
280 million years ago.
280
And they are
million.
invading two youngsters and I want in the kitchen.
Yeah, I got stoned by one not long ago. Rodney, would you take this last slide in this section, please?
You mean these developments terminate their marine life period, covering 25 million years, and known to your researchers as the Silurian.
Period, yeah. Yeah, see, they try to give these things labels that we understand, right? So next time we'll take 4, the Great Land Emergent Stage, the vegetative life period, and the Age of Fishes.
So we're going to quit early tonight?
We're going to quit early tonight so that we can take this as the second half and have enough to work on next week. The other thing is I need to get my computer worked on this week if I can. Try to stop
Yeah,
some
because
of
you
these
know, on
meetings.
mine, Roger, you're kind of breaking up a little bit. Does anybody hear that?
I know Billy sure was.
It's really just his
finger
throat.
was kind of at a standstill. And I thought, whoa, it's frozen up on.
Yeah, it may be my throat, you know.
I think it's the pollen over here.
Yeah, I've been
I
overdoing
think
it.
it's pollen's affecting me. I think it's affecting Tim.
Yeah.
I
Let
heard
me
you
stop the
coughing.
video and let's have a
You know,
couple
the
words.
weirdest thing, I have to have cough drops when I read because I just cough when I read a lot. It's weird.
Would you say a prayer to close us tonight, dear, and then we'll stop the video?
Dear Heavenly Father, Mother God, we thank you so much for this opportunity to study the book and to learn about a period of time that directly or indirectly affects all of us. And it's interesting to touch base with that and to come to an understanding that we truly have evolved. And we thank you for this amazing planet that we've been given to live on and to experience our life, our first life. And we look forward to our spending eternity with you and learning more and more and more. It is definitely an ongoing learning experience. We thank you for Roger's work and his dedication to studying the book and to allow and simplifying it so that others, including ourselves, can understand it and pass on the information, as well as his computer knowledge to help us to gather together and to study and to learn and grow. It is in your name always, Jesus, we give praise. Jesus of Nebadon, Jesus of Nazareth, Christ Michael of Nebadon. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again.